Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Urban Update. I'm Alberto Vasai. And on the show today, summer is in full swing, and so are the summer block parties in the city. We'll have all the details on who, where, and when. Also, we'll introduce you to a great financial tool that is actually free of charge and can help in the basics of checking accounts to the intricacies of household budgeting. Now, that's a little bit later on the show. And you won't want to miss our coverage of a pretty cool donation of 10,000 pounds of food that took place earlier this week. More on that in just a few. But up first, the 108th annual convention of the National NAACP took place earlier this week in Baltimore. Now, the convention always features a bevy of black speakers and great presenters, as one of the missions of the event is to actually establish policies and programs for the ensuing year. Now, for this, which is the nation's oldest and largest civil rights organization. Now, one of the most talked about topics at the convention was the organization's report from a 7-city tour, which addressed the organization's call for a national moratorium on charter school. To tell us more about this and also the other hot topic, the fact that the sitting president of the United States, Donald Trump, decided not to attend, thereby breaking with recent White House tradition of having the president speak. Now, we have the NAACP National Board member Michael Curry, who is also the national chair for Advocacy and Policy Committee for the organization. Welcome back to Boston, because you just got off a plane on Thursday.
Just got off a plane. Good to be back.
Good, good. The convention took place when? Monday?
It started on Saturday and it took place through Thursday.
Okay. So let's get right to it. Let's kind of start with what everyone was talking about at the beginning of the week, the fact that Donald Trump denied the invitation. He said he wasn't going to be. How was that received over there, and what were people talking about?
Yeah, I think, it's disappointing, right? In the years that I've been active, and that's since the mid-90s, we've been very fortunate to have Republican and Democratic candidates and presidents come through. And they'll speak to whatever they thought the issues are and to the issues that the NAACP cares about. So we were disappointed on two fronts. One, that when candidate Trump declined the invitation to come last year and then declined the invitation to come this year. So people look at it as an indicator of what kind of president he'll be when it comes to the issues that the NAACP is trying to champion. Yeah,
which for those who don't know, and I know who doesn't know, but which are some of those issues? Now let's kind of get into what were some of the major topics at this convention for this particular year.
Yeah, I think people don't know the breadth of the issues the NAACP focuses on. So we were deep in the trenches on voting rights and what we're seeing around voter suppression, this voter integrity commission that Trump has convened, which is really a distraction from voter suppression that we've been fighting against for many years. It was about health disparities and, quite frankly, diabetes and heart disease and cancer and the investments that are necessary to address those impacts in communities of color. It was environmental issues. We talk about Flint, Michigan, but there are many other examples where black and brown communities are dying of environmental hazards that people don't even know about, like East Chicago, Indiana. Where they're dealing with issues there as well. So there was a lot of issues that we've had. We had a large delegation of U.S. congressmen and senators come through, governors from across the country, and it's just unfortunate the president wasn't there.
Well, besides the fact that he didn't go, would you say that people, Thursday morning when you got off the plane back in Boston, were people inspired, motivated? Despite that, was this a successful convention?
Yeah, very successful. I think, it's a retooling of the organization under a Trump administration. We know that across the board, we're losing ground in a lot of areas. And it's the areas that people don't think about. It is the Department of Justice and the U.S. Attorney's offices across the country who investigate and hold people accountable for civil rights violations or hate crimes. We're going to see an erosion of those efforts across the country. It is the areas of education and the investments and support for traditional public education. It is the focus on civil rights divisions across the country and the fact that under this administration, there will be a budget cut to all those agencies like the Office of Civil Rights, the Department of Labor's Civil Rights Division. All those things are concerning us when people came back motivated and educated to do the next step, which is to advocate, to lobby, to protest. That work is underway now.
Now, specifically, there is one issue that would it be fair to call a little bit controversial when you guys called on the moratorium, national moratorium for charter schools. Could you kind of explain that? Because you guys came out with that position, then you got some backlash from the black community. Right. So you readdressed this with this 7-city tour, right? Tell me a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so I think it's first important to understand that the NAACP has been the leader on education advocacy for generations, right? The Brown v. Board of Education was a lawsuit born out of the NAACP, that we've been in the front lines both nationally and locally, even here in the Judge Garrity decision that led to busing in Boston. We've been in the mix on all those issues, and quite frankly, many of the gains that we've had have been a direct result of the legal advocacy of the NAACP. This is about traditional public education, which we support, and making sure that we have the investments in traditional public education school and hold them accountable. At the same time, there's an emerging issue of charter schools, which were supposed to be labs of innovation that would help inform traditional public education. What we're seeing is disparate discipline, expulsion, suspension. We're seeing for-profit entities coming in and either running for-profit charter schools or being the for-profit managers of charter schools. We're seeing a siphoning off of money from traditional education into these charter school systems that are leaving our classrooms underfunded to perform and provide the academic rigor that we need. We're seeing a host of issues, ELL, English language learners being screened out of those schools, or special education students not being admitted in. That's why we call for a moratorium to say, hey, we support good schools, but let's take a pause and look at what's not working in terms of transparency and accountability.
All right, but again, you did get some backlash from communities of color saying a lot of these charter schools have kids of color and are really doing better than the traditional schools. So you really embarked on this 7-city tour, and the report was what came out of the convention. Could you tell us what the report says, and are you guys back on the moratorium again?
We are. We are very much committed to the moratorium, because what we did is we got that backlash, as you talked about. And people said, Black and brown folks said to us, well, my son or daughter's in a charter school and is getting a better education. And we want to make sure that you, NAACP, know what that means for us as a family. We then embarked on that 7-city tour. We went to some of the hot spots for charter school movement and quality education as a broader topic. We went to New Haven, Connecticut, Memphis, New Orleans, which is almost completely charter now, Detroit, and LA and New York. What we learned was, and it's captured in the report, is that if you've seen one school system, you've seen one school system. There are very nuanced differences. Massachusetts doesn't have some of the same issues that we see across the country, particularly with the for-profit movement, but we also see many of the same issues, the discipline, the lack of accountability. Traditional schools are often held to the consent decrees that hold them accountable for diversity and teacher diversity. Charter schools don't have that holding them accountable. We see school boards or charter school boards that aren't reflective of the Black and brown students who are students within the school system. So all that's captured in the report. It reaffirmed our position that, one, there's a need for a moratorium, and two, there's a need to implement the kind of accountability, transparency that we see in the traditional side. We need to make sure that exists on the charter school side as well.
Michael, I don't want to put you on the spot, but are you willing to come back on the show and kind of discuss this with someone who, from our community, who's in favor of charter schools?
Absolutely.
Just to get the dialogue going, because I think, a lot of folks, they'll hear your side, then they like, yeah, he makes a lot of sense, and then they hear the other side, and I think it'd just be useful conversation.
I think that's absolutely makes sense. We went through this in Massachusetts. We had a ballot question, we had a legislative campaign to pass a bill, and we had a lawsuit. All failed in Massachusetts. Right. We've debated this many times, and I think there's a need to continue that debate that's now a broader debate that's facing the nation.
And I think you also look at it from a different point of view, which is from a national. You mentioned that, and I know that here in Massachusetts we're fortunate that we don't have some of those issues, at least not to the extent that across the country does. So you bring that national perspective. All right, before we go, a little sidebar here, ladies and gentlemen. This is for my boys, actually his boys, Michael Jr. and Malcolm. This is a little present from an Urban Update host who they love who he smells like. I don't know who it is. It's not Byron, by the way.
They're usually with me, and they love seeing you, and they love being here on the show, and you gave them some great advice. Yeah. That I will make sure that they get this as well.
All right, so Michael Jr. and Malcolm, those are for you, okay? Not for Dad. I'm making sure he gives them to you. Always a pleasure.
Always a pleasure to be here.
All right, stay along, because in just a few moments, summer in the city. Now we have all the fun details regarding the upcoming summer block parties in Boston. All the information right here on Urban Update.